Hey, Grandpa. Yeah, I got the thing you left in my mailbox. Yeah, it was good. Um, I just wanted to ask, why did you give me this medication? Yeah, last week. Yeah, yeah, I told you I was having performance problems on the Switch 2. No, Grandpa. Yikes. Um, okay. I don't need these, so I guess we could get lunch sometime, and I'll just give these back to you. I was having performance problems on the Switch 2 with a video game. It means I'll explain it over lunch. I gotta go. Okay, I love you too. Bye. Hey everyone. Today we're going to talk about Elden Ring Tarnished Edition on the Switch 2. We're going to look at some video that was taken by Nintendo Life, and I think it's quite interesting. So I develop games for a living. I'm going to explain the causes of the performance issues and also explain why it's not going to be a big deal. On the internet, we see people tend to dramatize things and they make things out to be a huge big deal. And that's unfortunately how the algorithm is. It rewards people for having these huge, outlandish, hyper-realistic reactions and creating hyper-reality. But at the end of the day, it's not a big deal. The developers working on this are professionals. They're highly skilled, highly experienced. They do have an external team helping them with the port, and that external team would have specialized knowledge when it comes to not just optimizing, but specializing the game for the Switch too. So I'm going to explain a couple things that I see in the trailer here. And if you're interested, I will share a little bit of a game that I'm working on for the Switch just to show a bit of my experience and expertise, and that I'm not one of those people on the internet that just pretends to be an expert because they worked at Blizzard and their daddy is a big, strong man or something like that. I don't know. But I also have credentials in teaching software development and game development as well. Let's go ahead and take a look at one of the more interesting parts of the trailer starting just here. I'll put the link in the description to the original video from Nintendo Life, so please do check that out. I'm just going to take a look at the footage here now. They claim that this area here has the worst performance. We'll just go ahead and watch it first, and we'll see that this area does appear to have the most problems when it comes to maintaining high frame rates. You can see the frame rate is dropping a fair bit here, and that happens for a number of reasons. So any game engine, any game hardware has a limited budget when it comes to rendering. And when I say budget, I don't mean spending money. I'm referring to the capabilities, the capacity of the hardware to process information in terms of the graphics processing and the central processing unit, the CPU and the GPU. So what we see here and why this area really struggles in a way that I have not seen in other areas, we see this demo being played in other areas and it does not have the same struggles with frame rate, is the use of all of this volumetric lighting here. So this fog is generated through a volumetric lighting system. I've mentioned this a few times in videos in the past, and volumetric lighting is a visual technique game developers use in order to convey a sense of density in the atmosphere. The most expensive thing for games to render generally is transparent particles or semi-transparent particles. And when it comes to volumetric lighting, there's so much processing that has to go on. It calculates distance to the camera, it has to be occluded by other objects, and so it has to check the depth. And checking the depth and any sort of mathematical computation that has to occur as a result of the pixel being transparent, it also has to check what geometry is going to look like behind it. And so in order to calculate volumetric lighting, generally that's quite expensive. Now the Switch 2 is good at handling that, but there is a limit at what hardware can do when it comes to the amount. You increase more and more and more. So you can make volumetric lighting less expensive by reducing the overall resolution of that processing effect. It means that your volumetric fog can have less definition, less detail, means it can have sharp details. Things tend to get a little blurry and muddy, but when it comes to volumetric lighting, that's not so big of a problem. It's okay for volumetric lighting to have blurriness because it's not a sharp texture. It's an effect to convey a sense of density in the atmosphere. Also have these sort of little fellas. You see these particle effects glowing in the blowing around in the wind. I'm not sure if they're embers or, okay, it looks like it's supposed to be a leaf. Those all have a cost because they have transparency to them. On top of that, we have other effects like bloom. We have pixel displacement around effects like this blurriness here. But basically this area is so expensive primarily because all of this fog here, this is very expensive. You can see it extends quite far out into the distance. And that's basically why this area struggles. You can address this issue by reducing the rendering resolution of the volumetric lighting, not the game itself, of the volumetric lighting. I don't have a Switch 2 development kit, so I can't speak exactly to the power of the Switch 2, but I've developed extensively on the original Switch. Anything like bloom, blur, depth of field, all of those post-screen processes that basically processing after the image has been rendered, and then they apply more processing to it. The higher your resolution is internally, then the significantly more expensive that will be on the rendering budget, the significantly more negative impact it will have on the frame rate. So you can actually reduce the resolution of those effects. And depending on the effect, it may not even be that noticeable. It has a significant benefit. It significantly helps your performance by reducing the resolution of those effects. In this situation, because the frame rate is thus, I would personally reduce the resolution of those post-screen shaders there, those screen effects, full screen effects. So that's what I've got to say about that area. But this area looks fine. But again, we have the volumetric lighting here. As you can see, those sun shafts coming through the sky here. I'm not entirely sure what method they're using for that, but it does look quite consistent. I would like to see the game running in person. I have not played this game. So the foliage looks fine. It seems to be using a bit more complex lighting for the foliage than Star Wars Outlaws, which we have seen. Star Wars Outlaws runs great on Switch 2. The shader that they're using for foliage, and a shader is part of the program that tells the game engine how geometry should be rendered, how something should be rendered, how it should look. And the simpler your shader is, then the less cost it has on your rendering budget and the less impact it has on the frame rate. So Star Wars Outlaws is using a simpler shader for foliage, and it runs quite good on Switch 2. The shaders here look more complex in terms of processing light and shadows. If they found a way to simplify that shader and make it simpler for things like grass and whatnot, it may look, not as visually complex in terms of lighting, but it would significantly help the rendering budget. In general, things like texture resolution, this might be, 2048 by 2048, reducing that to, 512 by 512, generally that does not have an impact on performance. So I can see that they haven't done too much trimming down and downscaling when it comes to the texture resolutions. Everything looks quite nice. I do see I'm seeing radial blur, a little bit of chromatic aberration, some motion blur. All of those things, they have a cost that builds up, builds up, builds up. And again, you can reduce the resolution of those screen effects, and it would significantly help. And that's true basically on any platform that I've worked on. That looks so cool. This is a cool looking game. Pretty neat. So neat. I'm not sure what engine they use for Elden Ring. I looked it up at one point. I knew what it was at one point, but it's not information that's relevant to me. So the shadows, they look to be pretty good resolution. The shadows are being drawn quite far, and it's the kind of game where shadows do need to be rendered quite far, or it's going to be immersion breaking. A game like this is very much about immersion, and it would look pretty bad if you can see the shadows cut off at a certain point. It's quite visible in games like Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, where I would say about 100 yards or 100 meters from the viewing camera, you can see the shadows are cut off. It's very jarring when games do that, but when you look at this, you can see that the shadows are being rendered very, very far away. What we could do is cascading. You can render significantly lower resolution shadows in the distance, and I certainly hope that they are making use of that technique significantly. You can see shadows there, yeah, quite far. I really hope there's heavy cascading. It's basically level of detail, and so the farther you are, it should be significantly lower resolution, but there still is a cost to rendering shadows, and it's so funny. It should be something that we can do more efficiently these days. Again, I don't have a Switch 2 development kit, so I don't have intricate knowledge of the hardware itself from a developer standpoint, but I would love if we got to a point in game development technology where rendering shadows was extremely efficient, because it's quite expensive. And the higher resolution your shadows are, the worse your performance gets. They could overall just lower the resolution of shadows and see if that also aids in maintaining the frame rate, because shadows are being drawn so far. I would personally just reduce the resolution of shadows, and that sort of thing does not negatively impact the overall experience. You're going to have people that will place it side by side and obsess and say, oh, look, the PS6 version has somewhat sharper shadows. Look, some people enjoy that. That's not something that actually affects your ability to enjoy the game. That does not affect the quality of the product. It's merely quantity. And it's quantity for something that is trivial and does not matter. It doesn't affect the end product. It doesn't negatively affect the enjoyability and the usability of the product. And what does affect the enjoyability and usability is low frame rates. So that's what I wanted to discuss today. And that's not even getting into what could be affecting things from a processing standpoint. This game is gorgeous. Holy shit. Oh my God. Wow. This is really nice. Oh, I will also point out we are using real-time, looks to be real-time volumetric clouds in the sky. That's quite expensive. I've implemented solutions for that in my games on Switch, and that is expensive. This is expensive. These clouds are they're generated and rendered in real time. This is high resolution. I would strongly recommend reducing the resolution of any real-time clouds you might have. Let me just look, make sure they are. The camera moves too much. I need a still moment. In the past, we would just use a still image for the skybox, and it would not be animated to be stuck sitting that way. I highly doubt a game with this style of presentation and this level of immersion and visual realism, I highly doubt they would be using just a static skybox. So it's hard for me to tell, because I can't know. I need the camera to sit still and just look at the sky for a few seconds, and they're not going to do that. So I'm just going to assume, but when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. I'm going to assume that these clouds are rendered in real time. That's very expensive. In Star Wars Outlaws on the Switch 2, they have reduced the rendering resolution of those real-time volumetric clouds that are generated in real time, and that is an excellent decision to make. The clouds do look a little bit blocky and chunky compared to other platforms, but by reducing the rendering resolution of those volumetric real-time clouds, you get a significant performance boost. So this isn't just optimizing, it's specializing, right? It's downscaling and specializing for the hardware. It's optimization is not, people tend to use that term as this catch-all umbrella thing, but there are other aspects to making a game run well other than just optimization. There's specialization and there's downscaling. All right, that's all I have to share when it comes to Elden Ring running on Switch 2. Thanks very much for watching that. And if you'd like to see me discuss a game that I'm working on, then I will share that with you now. On screen is development footage of Silverfall's Ruby River. This was packaged together with Silverfall's Gaiden Deathly Delusion Destroyers, which is officially the final title to launch on the Nintendo 3DS. This actually launched and it was compatible with all models, not just the new 3DS. It was extremely difficult to get this launched and developed, and it was an absolute challenge, and I had to develop the entirety of these two games packaged together within 2 months, and it launched with only 2 or 3 weeks left for the Nintendo 3DS eShop. So this, what you see on screen, is a remaster. There's a graphical overhaul, and what we're looking at is Ruby River. Again, there were 2 games, Gaiden Deathly Delusion Destroyers, Ruby River. Gaiden Deathly Delusion Destroyers is a battle RPG, and you can actually send resources down the river, and when you play Ruby River, you're able to use resources that you send over from the other game. They're 2 different gameplay styles, 2 different genres, but the stories take place at the same time. And in Ruby River, you can build, craft armor, and then you can float that down the river and send that elemental armor down to your party members that are in the other game, in Gaiden Deathly Delusion Destroyers. So in Ruby River here, you can see the use of volumetric lighting, and it's rendered in lower resolution. I'll show you a couple different times of day. And this is very much still quite early in development, as I'm still revamping much of the visuals and adding more detail. You can see the lighting effect of the sun being occluded by the trees. This is a combination of a couple different effects. There is lens flare, bloom, a little bit of volumetric lighting. Again, I try to keep that low resolution because that is quite expensive. And I also use sun shafts or light shafts. This is a very primitive technique that's been used shortly after the dawn of man. Light shafts were introduced, and they're not that expensive, so they're have to be used very carefully with a significant attention to detail, because it doesn't have the same kind of brute force autopilot, always looks good the way that volumetric lighting does. You have to use it in a very deliberate way, so you combine that with a couple of other effects. You can see in this game you can interact with your environment. Basically every piece of foliage is destructible. It turns into crafting materials. You can build environments, you can build armor and weapons, and your armor and weapons are breakable, but you can increase your proficiency levels, you can level up your own stats and skills, you can cook food, you can create all different kinds of furniture, and you basically try to survive and level up your character, build your dream cabin, fortress, mansion, and survive cryptids that will attack you and try to destroy your stuff. That's what I wanted to share. I'll leave this on screen just a little bit longer if you'd like to see a little bit more of Silver Falls Ruby River. Again, this will be launching exclusively on the Switch, so if you have a Switch, please look forward to that. I'm working on some other games right now because people have been asking me to launch games on other platforms. Silver Falls is exclusive to Nintendo, so I'll be launching Goo Buddies first. I'll see how people feel about that, see how well the launch figures go, and depending on that, I may do another game that will also launch on other platforms, or I will resume work on Silver Falls Ruby River. I also have other Silver Falls titles in the works as well, so if you are a Silver Falls enjoyer, please look forward to 8 Breaks in Time as well, which will be about time travel, genuinely about time travel this time.